There's a warning today that thousands of cases of Lyme disease could be going undiagnosed. Spread through bites of small ticks, its symptoms can be mild at first, but the long-term effects can be devastating. The National Institute of Health and Care Excellence says that the 3,000 reported cases of the condition is likely to be an underestimate. For many people, it's the failure to quickly diagnose Lyme disease which can lead to severe medical consequences. Doctors incorrectly thought Andrew McGuinness's symptoms were the result of a stroke, brain tumour and multiple sclerosis before correctly putting them down to Lyme disease. Well, Andrew has since written a book based on his experience and joins us from our central London studio. Really appreciate you talking to us, Andrew. It seems like the main problem with Lyme disease is that it's quite easy to mistake it for something else.
It is. I was initially misdiagnosed with an insect bite with cellulitis, which then developed into more severe symptoms. I was diagnosed with a migraine, then I was diagnosed with a stroke, and then another stroke, and then a possible brain tumour, and then they settled on multiple sclerosis. So these are all life-changing conditions, but actually what it boiled down to was Lyme disease, which was eventually diagnosed, but it took a number of years. So the life-changing condition is really Lyme disease.
How did it affect your life?
I had 2 jobs at lecturing posts in creative writing, and I had to let those go. I was seriously ill. I thought I was going to die, actually, to be honest. I even wrote letters to my loved ones. It was that severe and chronic. I thought my life was over, but it wasn't. I came back. I got treated. I made a substantial recovery, though not complete. But really, and I'm here today really to talk about the problems with diagnosing, because the problem is if you don't diagnose soon enough, the condition worsens and is harder to treat. So the so-called chronic Lyme is the chronic problem, which is not being faced up to yet. So I think the problem is with undiagnosis and underestimation of the cases of Lyme is because of misdiagnosis, mainly because the blood testing is inaccurate. It's not as rare a case contracted as people first thought, Lyme disease, and also it's not easily treated if not caught soon enough.
And just tell us, what can't you do now that you could do before you contracted the disease?
Well, I wrote this book, Anatomized, because one of the first things I noticed, because the infection went to my brain, was that I was losing the ability to read and write. So that was my living, that was my passion. And I was really had to abandon that for 2 to 3 years. Part of my recovery was writing this book, Anatomized, which is all about the problems diagnosing Lyme disease. So that was the main thing that I lost, which I've since recovered substantially. But I suffer with fatigue, varying degrees of that. But also, worse than that, I suppose, is neuropathic pain that was caused because of the infection in my brain. So I'm on very strong anti-seizure medication purely for the pain.
And Andrew, why do you think there are so many problems with diagnosing the disease?
I think it's because because the infection can mimic so many other conditions, hence that long row of incorrect diagnoses for me. It's happening to many thousands of people up and down the UK and in America, right across Europe, is that it's very hard to pin down. So the medical professionals who are not specialised in more than one specialism don't see it as an early differential diagnosis. So they will go for the first thing that it could be, statistically, and Lyme disease is right at the bottom normally, by which time the poor patient has suffered immense pain and also frustration. They don't know where to go. After they've seen 1 or 2 doctors, they're not quite sure, who do I see now? There isn't a specialist in Lyme disease working within the NHS who has experience in all of the different medical fields associated with Lyme disease. So I think that's the key problem that needs addressing.
OK, Andrew McGuinness, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now, there's a warning today that thousands of cases of Lyme disease could be going undiagnosed. Spread through the bites of small ticks, some symptoms can be mild at first, but the long-term effects can be devastating. The The National Institute of Health and Care Excellence says that 3,000 reported cases of the condition is likely to be an underestimate. Joining me now is Simti Few. It took her a year to get a correct diagnosis for Lyme disease after a year of tests. Just tell us what happened.
I was bitten about 3 years ago in 2015, and I was lucky. I'll say lucky because I happened to have spotted the tick on my right foot, and I obviously Google tick bites, and Lyme disease came up. So I went to my GP and I said, could you test me for Lyme disease? To which she agreed, and we did the ELISA test. But little did I know then that it takes about 6 weeks for the pathogens and the antibodies of the tick to show. So I got a negative test. And then based on that test, I just assumed that I didn't have Lyme disease. But then I started getting a lot of symptoms like flu-like symptoms, headaches, migraines, panic attacks, tingling and numbing sensation, joint pain, memory loss. And when I started having the memory loss, that's when I realized there's something really wrong with me. So then I had to go privately and get my blood samples sent to America and Germany, and it came back highly positive.
And since then, how has it affected your life?
It has affected my life in a lot of ways. I'm no longer the person that I used to be. I used to be very active, driven, but I found myself almost bedridden. And also, I couldn't get the help from the NHS because the NHS basically don't believe in chronic Lyme disease. They just believe it doesn't exist. But here I am today, and so are a lot of people out there suffering from Lyme disease and being misdiagnosed because there's a lack of awareness, and there's also a lack of training for the GPs in the UK to recognise early symptoms of Lyme disease. Lyme disease can be treated, but if it's caught early enough and if you're given a course of antibiotics straight away, sadly, there is no cure for chronic Lyme disease, and that is the truth. It just goes into remission.
Just looking at, the figures, 3,000 cases, that is said to be completely off the mark. I mean, why do you think that is? Why do you think that there isn't that much information, or doctors aren't perhaps spending more time in finding out more about the disease?
According to John Codwell, there could be up to 45,000 cases out there that are being misdiagnosed. And the reason being is because the testing is not accurate. There is not a lot of funding going into treating and into finding the correct testing in the UK, because they just don't believe it exists in the UK. And which it does. So there should be more funding going into finding, the treatments in the UK.
Okay, Tim, so appreciate your time. Thank you.
Over the last few days a little bit, so maybe you swapped a walk on the beach for a walk in the woods. Well, experts say there is still reason to protect your skin, this time not from sunburn but from ticks. Up to 3,000 cases of Lyme disease are reported in the UK every year, and it can have very severe consequences, as Lorna Shattuck's been finding out.
It may have been this cuddle with a panda that changed Sophie Ward's life forever. Back in 2008, the champion swimmer enjoyed a family trip to Beijing to watch the Olympics. But after the visit to a Chinese nature reserve, began the migraines, muscle pains, infections and food intolerances that have plagued her ever since. Only a decade later have doctors finally diagnosed Sophie with Lyme disease, probably given to her by a tick on the panda.
One day you're way up and the next minute you can't get out of bed and you're bedridden, and it makes it very, very difficult to live. You can't make plans, social events and activities have to be sort of scaled down to a couple of hours because they tire you out so quickly. And at 24, you think, oh, I can travel the world, I should be going out partying, and you can't hack it.
One of the most common symptoms of Lyme disease is a pink or red circular bullseye rash, like this, around the bite area.
It's imperative that you catch it quickly. My symptoms were pretty obvious. I had one of those rashes on my back, and you get blood tested, and it came back as positive. But the speed in which I was diagnosed was crucial.
Experts say you should take particular care to check for ticks after you've been walking in long grass or wooded areas like this, as well as urban parks and gardens. And they're particularly keen to raise awareness because in the largest survey of UK ticks and tick-borne diseases, they looked at over 12,000 dogs and found around a third of them were carrying a tick. But 47% of dog owners didn't know that ticks carry diseases that can be passed on to both animals and humans. Herbie the Doberman's come for his annual checkup, and vet James Greenwood is warning his owner and all the dog owners he comes across this summer about the dangers of the small blood-sucking insects which can give dogs fever and swollen joints.
Check over your dog every single day, especially if you've taken them into an area where you know there are ticks around. So checking over their fur, looking between their paws, around their ears, that's the first thing to do. And if you do find a tick, the key then is to remove it safely and effectively.
How do you do that? Well, firstly, as soon as possible for both humans and dogs. Use tweezers or a special tick tool to grasp the tick's head as close to the skin as you can. With tweezers, pull upwards firmly and steadily, and only twist if you're using that special tool. Don't squeeze the tick's body, and dispose of it afterwards in alcohol. The warmer, wetter winters we've been having recently are a great breeding ground for ticks.
Oh, good boy.
So whether it be your dog or yourself, checking for those tiny but potentially life-changing parasites could make all the difference. Lorna Shattuck, Sky News.
This next story may make you think a little bit when you take your dog next for a walk in the woods or the park. We're talking about tick-borne diseases, which can have really serious consequences for humans as well as animals. With up to 3,000 new cases of Lyme disease reported in the UK every year, the Big Tick Project is trying to help people protect themselves and their pets from this harmful disease. Well, here with me now, the former England rugby player Matt Dawson, who has experienced this disease firsthand. Good morning to you, Matt. Now, Lyme disease, we're starting to hear more about it as we learn more about it. Talk to me about your experience. How did you contract it?
I was just doing some training in a park in West London and got bit, didn't know about it. A tick's obviously gone off an animal, gone into the grass. I've been rolling around doing my training. It's gone onto my back. And yeah, really, I just had a general checkup. They saw the rash, diagnosed with Lyme, but then it had got into my heart, scar tissue in my heart. I had to have a few procedures over the years.
So that's the bite that we're looking at now, is it?
No, that's not my bite. Mine was, well, that's not my bite, but that's very similar. But it doesn't always manifest itself. So, to be honest, I got involved in the Big Tick Project because I was inundated with people who were asking, you know, what to do. They're having these experiences, the pictures that you see in there, or they're struggling in some way, shape, or form. And to be honest, I didn't know where to go. I didn't know how to direct anything.
So there aren't normal, well, there can be symptoms like this, but often people will have it for a number of months, maybe years, without knowing.
Yeah.
What were your symptoms? How quickly were you diagnosed, and how vital is it that you catch it quickly?
Yeah, it's imperative that you catch it quickly. My symptoms were pretty obvious. I had one of those rashes on my back, and you get blood tested, and it came back as positive. But the speed in which I was diagnosed was crucial. A lot of people who have Lyme, they may have probably caught it from their animal at home, their pet, their cat, their dog.
Yeah.
They've not taken any kind of prevention for their pets. It's gone off their pets, gone onto them. They don't really know about it, and all of a sudden, you know, the realization is that a tick can carry a disease that can affect humans, not just the pets. So that's where the focus, and I thought, you know, there isn't any prevention for humans, as I said, so let's focus on where the prevention is, and the work that Bristol University and MSD did was around animals. There'll be plenty of people at home right now eating their breakfast with their dogs and cats next to them, thinking, hold on a minute, what can I do to make sure that my pets don't have ticks, because it will affect me and it will affect the family. And Yeah, it's been a life changer for me.
Because you had multiple heart operations.
Yeah.
You can be cured of Lyme, but it leaves behind massive health implications that you're still battling with now.
Yeah, still, on daily medication, still having regular checkups. Can't do any hard exercise that's going to raise my heart rate.
Which is a former sportsman,
which is quite a little bit tricky, because I don't want to be flogging myself every single day, but I still want to be doing exercise. So I have to be quite careful about that. My kids can't hide behind the door and come out and scare me and surprise me. Those sorts of things you've got to be really careful with, because you don't want to be shocking the heart. And it's very difficult to rest the heart totally, as you could rest your hamstring or a muscle that I was used to. So it is a little bit tricky day to day.
So the Big Tick project is talking about protecting animals from ticks rather than humans, because of course, if you've got a pet, you're with it every day, and you have to walk them in parks and forests and things like that. So it's about protecting the animal rather than the human, because that's how you contract it normally.
Making sure that the preventative measures are as good as you possibly can be. Go into the vet. Mm-hmm. Go to the. I don't know the ins and outs of the detail of around the prevention. If you go to the vet, you're going to get specific advice on how you can prevent against ticks. The implication of that is that all of a sudden, when you're in the house, in the carpets, in your rugs, in the garden, you are less likely to have ticks. So when your children or you are around those animals, then there is obviously less. There is lots of information. bigtickproject.co.uk. As I said right at the top, I have hundreds of emails of people just not knowing what to do. There's a lot of uncertainty. All those cases, those 3,000 cases increasing every year of Lyme disease, and people just don't know what to do. So hopefully there's a target, there's an area for some people to go to get a little bit more informed.
Okay, well, Matt, really interesting to talk to you. Thank you very much for coming in to talk about the Big Tick project. We wish you well. Thank you.
Thanks, AJ.